Cope with. To manage or deal with a phobia. Synonym for. Cope with. Manage, handle, deal with, confront, face, tackle. He struggled to cope with the pain of losing his loved one. She learned to cope with the chronic pain by practicing relaxation techniques. She has learned to cope with her fear of heights over time. Face up to. To confront or deal directly with a phobia. Synonym for. Face up to. Confront, address, deal with, tackle, brave encounter. She decided to face up to her fear of heights by gradually exposing herself to elevated places. It's essential to face up to your phobias to overcome them. It was time to face up to the pain and seek professional help. Run from. To avoid or escape situations that trigger a phobia. Synonym for. Run from. Avoid, escape, flee, evade, shun, dodge. She realized she could no longer run from her phobia and needed to confront it. People with agoraphobia may tend to run from crowded places. He always ran from the pain, seeking temporary distractions instead of addressing the root cause. Shut out. To avoid thinking about or acknowledging a phobia. Synonym for. Shut out. Ignore, exclude, block out, avoid, disregard, tune out. She tried to shut out the memories of the accident to avoid reliving the pain. He shut out the thoughts of failure and focused on positive affirmations. It's not healthy to shut out your fears. Facing them is crucial. Back away from. To retreat or move away from something that triggers a phobia. Synonym for. Back away from. Retreat from, withdraw from, shrink from, pull back from, avoid, recoil from. She backed away from situations that triggered her phobia, preferring to avoid them altogether. He often backed away from social gatherings, unable to confront his social anxiety. He tends to back away from spiders due to his arachnophobia. Bail out on. To avoid participating in an activity or situation due to a phobia. Synonym for. Bail out on. Abandon, desert, forsake, leave, withdraw from, drop out of. She bailed out on attending the party because of her fear of crowds. He bailed out on a hiking trip when he realized it involved crossing a suspension bridge. She had to bail out on the camping trip because of her fear of the dark. Draw back from. To recoil or pull away from something due to a phobia. Synonym for. Draw back from. Recoil from, retreat from, shrink from, withdraw from, shy away from, pull back from. She drew back from the edge of the cliff, paralyzed by her fear of heights. He drew back from the snake in fear. He drew back from the spider in fear, unable to overcome his arachnophobia. Shy away from. To avoid or be hesitant about something due to a phobia. Synonym for. Shy away from. Avoid, evade, recoil from, retreat from, withdraw from, shrink from. Many people shy away from public speaking due to social phobias. She shied away from swimming in the ocean due to her thalassophobia. He shies away from public speaking because of his glossophobia. Freak out over. To become extremely anxious or panicky about something, often related to a phobia. Synonym for freak out over. Panic about, become anxious about, stress over, fret about, worry about, be alarmed by. She freaked out over the sight of spiders, revealing her arachnophobia. She tends to freak out over the idea of flying. He freaked out over the thought of flying, a clear sign of his aviophobia. Dread the thought of. To feel intense fear or anxiety at the idea of something, common in phobias. Synonym for dread the thought of. Fear the idea of, be terrified by, be horrified by, shudder at the thought of, be apprehensive about, have nightmares about. He dreads the thought of being in confined spaces. She dreads the thought of heights, indicating her acrophobia. He dreads the thought of enclosed spaces, a sign of his claustrophobia. Shudder at. To react with a shiver or tremor due to fear or disgust, often associated with phobias. Synonym for shudder at. Recoil from, cringe at, flinch at, quail at, tremble at, be horrified by. He shuddered at the thought of needles, a clear indication of his trypanophobia. She shudders at the thought of spiders. She shuddered at the mention of snakes, revealing her ophidiophobia. Flinch from. To react with a sudden movement away from something frightening or unpleasant. Synonym for flinch from. Recoil from, shrink from, withdraw from, retreat from, pull back from, shy away from. She flinches from the sound of thunder, showing her astrophobia. He tends to flinch from loud noises due to his phobia. He flinches from large crowds, indicating his agoraphobia. Be paralyzed with fear. To be unable to move or act due to overwhelming fear, a common response to phobias. Synonym for be paralyzed with fear. Freeze with fear, become immobilized by fear, be petrified with fear, be unable to move due to fear, experience paralysis from fear, feel paralyzed by fear. She was paralyzed with fear when confronted with a spider. The person with claustrophobia may be paralyzed with fear in tight spaces. He was paralyzed with fear at the thought of speaking in public. Break out in a sweat. To start sweating profusely due to fear or anxiety, a physical response to phobias. Synonym for break out in a sweat. Perspire heavily, sweat profusely, be drenched in sweat, have beads of sweat, be soaked in sweat, sweat buckets. She broke out in a sweat at the sight of blood, indicating her hemophobia. She breaks out in a sweat at the thought of speaking in public. He broke out in a sweat when he encountered a dog, revealing his cynophobia. Shake at the knees. To experience trembling or weakness in the knees due to fear, a physical reaction to phobias. Synonym for shake at the knees. tremble at the knees, quake at the knees, have weak knees, experience knee tremors, be shaky at the knees, feel knee trembles. She shook at the knees when faced with the prospect of flying. The person with acrophobia may shake at the knees when near heights. He shook at the knees at the thought of being in small, enclosed spaces. Recoil in horror. To draw back or flinch away from something frightening or shocking, a common response in phobias. Synonym for recoil in horror. Shrink back in horror, flinch in horror, shudder in horror, draw back in horror, cringe in horror, pull away in horror. He recoiled in horror at the sight of needles, revealing his trypanophobia. She recoiled in horror when she saw a cockroach, indicating her entomophobia. She recoils in horror at the sight of snakes. Sweat bullets. To be extremely nervous or anxious, often associated with phobias. Synonym for sweat bullets. Sweat profusely, perspire heavily, be drenched in sweat, be soaked in sweat, sweat buckets, be dripping with sweat. Before the flight, he was sweating bullets due to his aviophobia. He sweated bullets during job interviews due to his social anxiety. She sweated bullets when she was asked to go on stage, revealing her stage fright. Turn pale. To become visibly paler due to fear or shock, a physical reaction to phobias. Synonym for turn pale. Blanch, grow faint, become ashen, whiten, bleach, become pallid. She turned pale when confronted with her phobia of needles. She turned pale at the thought of being in a crowded elevator. He turned pale when faced with the prospect of speaking in front of a large audience. Feel one's heart race. To experience a rapid or pounding heartbeat due to fear or anxiety, a common response in phobias. Synonym for feel one's heart race. Sense one's pulse quicken, experience rapid heartbeat, feel the heart pound, perceive racing heart, sense palpitations, feel the pulse race. He felt his heart race when confronted with the idea of being in a confined space, indicating his claustrophobia. In social situations, she feels her heart race due to social phobia. She felt her heart race when she had to cross a bridge, revealing her geophirophobia. Nervous wreck. To be extremely anxious or agitated, often used to describe someone with intense phobias. Synonym for nervous wreck. Anxious wreck, agitated mess, nervous wreck, jittery wreck, panicked wreck, shaky wreck. She became a nervous wreck before flying, a clear sign of her aviophobia. He became a nervous wreck at the thought of entering the haunted house. He turned into a nervous wreck when faced with the idea of public speaking. Level up your English. Master vocabulary, idioms, and phrasal verbs with fun quizzes. Translate meanings into 104 languages. Download now. Link in the description. Please like and subscribe to our channel.